A new Gallup poll shows the Republican Party approval is at a 7-year high at 45%. The first time it's reached that height since January of 2011, after Republicans won back the House in the Tea Party wave of the 2010 midterm elections. This 45% approval rating compares to a 36% approval rating for the party this same time last year. At the same time, though, a new poll from NBC and the Wall Street Journal shows the Democrats' lead on the generic congressional ballot has risen to 12 points. The poll shows Democrats leading Republicans 52% to 40% for control of Congress. So what do these contradicting numbers mean for the midterms? With me now, former Trump campaign director of data and strategy, Matt Braynard. Matt, good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
All right, Matt, let's start with this NBC Wall Street Journal poll showing Democrats up by 12 points, generic congressional ballot. What do you make of it?
Well, I think, once again, we need to look at the methodology of the survey and recognize that they're not really sure who they're talking to when they're taking this poll. They're self-identified from random digit dialing. There's no real attempt to screen people, no real attempt to make sure they're not talking to foreign citizens, people who can't vote or don't vote or have no interest in voting. So if you look at some of the other surveys that have been taken more recently with a more rigorous methodology, you'll find that the difference is really closer to 4 points. And unless it's actually on election day in the 5, 6 to 7 point range, the House is unlikely to change hands. And a big part of that is because you have many Democrat districts where the Democrat routinely wins by 90% of the vote because it's in these dense urban areas. And you have many Republican districts where the Republicans just kind of hold on with 53, 54% of the vote. So when you have population distributed that way, the Democrats need much more than just, 3, 4, 5 points to be 4 or 5 points ahead on, the generic tally to be able to win the number of seats they're going to need to take over the House.
Right. That's
now, I want to turn the attention to the...
No, go ahead. That's pretty interesting, though. That's pretty interesting that you think they need 5 to 7 percentage points on Election Day, not a month, not 2 months ahead of time. 5 to 7 percentage points on Election Day, or the Democrats won't win back the House. You don't hear that kind of analysis when you're reading write-ups about this NBC Wall Street Journal poll.
Yeah, because it's just the way that the districts have been drawn, and some of it is partisan drawing. You've seen cases in North Carolina where there's questions as to whether or not you can use pure politics, Republican versus Democrat, to determine how to draw those lines. But also this happens kind of inconsequentially because of geography. In cities where there are dense populations, they are overwhelmingly Democrat. New York City is a great example. But when you get outside of New York City, you have a lot of Republican districts. And you look at the numbers on election days, you have so many Democrats winning with overwhelming margins because they're packed densely into these districts just from the circumstances where they happen to live. And these Republican districts where they're winning by much smaller margins, but when you distribute that way, you end up winning more seats that way. And that's just one of the circumstances of the way the population is distributed in the country.
Right, which is pretty interesting. Like I said, I don't think a lot of people hear that, but it's really important to hear. Okay, Matt, I want to pivot to this Gallup poll that shows the Republican Party approval is at 45%. One of the most striking things about this poll was comparing it when you look at where the approval rating for Republicans was last year at this time. It's 9 points higher. What caused this shift?
Well, a couple of things. Before I get into that, we can't just take a poll that's good for us and dismiss the fact that maybe it has questionable methodology too. And this one certainly suffers from that, especially when you do a head-to-head comparison. However, this poll has been conducted in a consistent manner going back many years. And regardless of that, they still have a population who answered these survey questions said, I'm a Republican, and do you or do you not support the party? You have a favorable view of the party. And that number really skyrocketed. And if you think about it, it makes sense because a year ago, we were pointing the finger at our party leaders for not successfully repealing Obamacare. There was a lot of division and criticism between Capitol Hill and the president. What do you have now? A party that's been unified maybe like it never has before behind Justice Kavanaugh, or the prospect of Justice Kavanaugh and the fight that he's facing, which many of us believe to be a incredibly unfair and unjust fight that this good, honorable man is having to wage to get on the Supreme Court, somebody who very much deserves it. So what you're having here is you've got Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, Donald Trump, all of us unified in our goal of getting this guy on the court. So all the bygones are now bygones, and the voters see this. So, some voters may have a criticism of President Trump. Some may have criticisms of Republicans on Capitol Hill, but this is something that can really unite us. And between now and Election Day, there's really not a whole lot of other things for the Republicans to get into a fight, a family fight about. So we're unified on this, and we're going to take this unity and march through the November elections with it. And that's exactly what we need to keep our voters motivated and get them to turn out.
Right. And that's pretty interesting because I think it's very interesting to hear you break down these polls. And I like the fact that you look at a poll that's favorable to Republicans and still say, well, wait a second, we got to look at this methodology and see if it's honest. Matt, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it.